Well, luckily for two teams, I was wrong.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights and soon to be mostly team-free, but until then, beloved and loaded Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, what exactly was I wrong about that's benefiting two teams? I'll get to that in a moment. The coaching carousel, Chip Kelly appears to be staying put, and then I'll take a look at my preseason predictions versus how things played out over 12 games for every team. But I was wrong because before the season, all summer, leading up to the year and throughout the year, it was my contention the Pac-12 was not going to be able to make the college football playoff in the final iteration of the four-team format. My thinking was that the conference is as good and as deep as it has ever been, and that everyone, as has often been the case, is just going to cannibalize one another. But that did not happen. Now, I think one of the biggest reasons it didn't happen is Cam Rising didn't play a single snap for Utah this year. I think that this completely altered the championship landscape and the college football playoff picture as well. Utah went 8-4 with Bryson Barnes there, who is severely limited compared to Cam Rising. They are 9-3 at the worst. They're probably a 10-2, maybe even, I'm not kidding, an 11-1 football team if Cam Rising's there. I think the gap between him and Bryson Barnes is significant enough. So that certainly helped. I also, like many people, overvalued USC. And I think undervalued both Washington and Oregon before the year and their ability to get through. Washington got through their conference slate undefeated. Oregon had just the one loss. They're meeting the Pac-12 championship game in Las Vegas on Friday. But the winner of that game is going to the playoff. And I don't see a realistic world in which that isn't the case. So Washington, ahead of the latest edition of the college football playoff rankings, should be number 3. Based on what the committee, I'm going to talk about the rankings and what I think will happen based on what the committee has done in previous weeks to lay all of this out. Washington was number 4 last week because they went on the road, beat a good Oregon State team in Corvallis in a game in which they, on paper, should have lost because they were an underdog slightly, but most importantly, it was a rainstorm, and they're a passing football team, and Oregon State's a running and defense team. Yeah, Washington won that game anyway. They were correctly rewarded for it. They finished the regular season 12-0. So if last week they're number 4, beating Washington State at home, it was not an impressive win for the Huskies, but Florida State didn't have an impressive win either. And Ohio State lost. So Ohio State is in all likelihood going to fall out of the top 4, as they should. Florida State should move back in. The question is, where do the Buckeyes go? I personally believe they should go behind Alabama. I don't know if the committee will drop them that far. We'll just have to wait and see. But Washington is going to be, heading into this Pac-12 championship game, the number 3 team in the country. It'll be Georgia 1, Michigan 2, or maybe Michigan 1, Georgia 2. Washington should be there at number 3. There has been nothing to indicate that Florida State, after struggling with their backup quarterback against Florida's backup quarterback on the road with a below average, 5-7 Florida team, nothing to me indicates that they're going to jump the Huskies there. Even though Washington did not play a great game against Washington State, they got the win. So I think the Huskies will go to number 3. Oregon, I would imagine, will be number 5. I don't know that Ohio State's resume is good enough with the way they have played against some teams this year to keep them ahead of Oregon in their resume. I could see it, but does it feel like Ohio State, who, hung on against Notre Dame and, played well and got a really good win against Penn State. Both those wins were on the road. Maybe they value that more than Oregon's resume, which is certainly not the strongest in the country now that the dust is settled. And we've done an annual tradition of, well, hey, the Pac-12 looks really good in the non-conference slate, but now that they're beating up on each other, we're going to determine the Pac-12 isn't actually any good, which I find to be a ridiculous premise, but that's a conversation perhaps for another episode. I don't think Ohio State is going to be at number 5. I think they're going to fall a pretty decent ways. Could they be ahead of Texas? Maybe. But in all likelihood, I think Oregon ends up at number 5. So if they're there and Washington is at number 3, the winner of that game is picking up a top 5 win, and there's no way either one gets left out, because Washington would certainly have a win that keeps them from getting leapfrogged by 2 teams, no matter what happens elsewhere. And if Oregon beats them with the way the first game played out, I think the Ducks would probably go up at least 1 slot, if not 2, because they would become one of the top 4 teams, with Washington probably falling behind them. I think because the first matchup was so close and it was in Seattle, if Oregon wins, and they're favored by a really, really big number compared to what I was expecting on Friday, I figured the Ducks would be favored based on how the second half of the season has gone. It opened at 7.5 and it's up to 9.5. That's a lot of points for 2 teams whose last 2 meetings have been decided by a combined 6 points. That's a lot is all I'm saying here. But I don't think that game is going to be viewed as anything but what it is, which is another great win or a great win. It would be Oregon's best win of the year. It would be Washington convincingly showing the entire world that they're the class of the Pac-12 this season. So Washington could not get dropped. An unbeaten Power 5 champ is in. A 1-loss Power 5 champ could get left out this year. Texas could get left out of the playoff. Heck, Bama, as a 1-loss SEC champ, could get left out of the playoff because of their loss to Texas. But I don't think that's particularly likely. I think if Bama beats Georgia, they would flip Bama and Georgia, because Georgia's resume is not all that impressive. The SEC is not that good, and I think that has been reflected in the rankings for the most part this year. Aside from Tennessee, I think that Bama's resume is really good. I think Georgia's is less impressive when you look at the caliber of teams that they have played. Georgia did not play LSU. Georgia, I can't remember. They missed somebody else in the SEC. I'm forgetting. Well, they haven't played Alabama, of course. So I think that the SEC champ is not guaranteed to get in. If it's Bama, if it's Georgia, of course they will be. But if Oregon wins, I suspect the committee that has had the Ducks as the highest ranked 1-loss team all season long is going to put the Ducks into Washington's spot wherever the Huskies fall in the next edition of the college football playoff rankings. And if Washington wins, they are certainly not going to do anything but stay inside the top 4 as they should. So before the year, I didn't think the Pac-12 was going to get into the playoff. I think they're almost guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff here. I don't see a world in which they get left out when you look at the teams that are around them. Oregon has been ranked ahead of Texas in every single iteration of the rankings. A 24-point win against the number 16 team in the country is not going to put Texas, even though they blew out Texas Tech, that's not going to cause Oregon to suddenly fall behind Texas. And the Longhorns in their championship game play Oklahoma State, who's not even close to as good as Washington. So if Oregon wins that game, they'd stay ahead of Texas. And if Alabama wins the SEC championship game, I think they can get left out of the playoff because of that game against Texas. I think you could have a world, if Florida State wins, it'd be hard. I don't want to see Florida State in the top 4 because without Jordan Travis there, it sucks. I feel for the kid. I really do. I think that is a bummer and a half because he's a really good player. If Florida State gets into the college football playoff, no matter who they play, they're getting housed. They are getting housed if it's, Tate Rodemaker back there, which is who it would be. So if Bama wins the SEC championship, I think your 4 teams would be the Pac-12 winner, Michigan, if Florida State were to win, and then Texas. I think that's what should happen. I think that, frankly, is what would happen because of that head-to-head that Texas has over Alabama. So I was wrong on that before the season, but happy to have been. We'll see the Pac-12 in the playoff this year. Will we be seeing Chip Kelly as UCLA's head football coach? It appears the answer to that question is yes. Not every Bruin is thrilled with that. If you go check out FanDuel, I promise you will be thrilled because as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. And you could stay hot as a gambler if you've been hot this season or you have a chance to get hot. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's all it takes. You could put $5 on Texas to beat Oklahoma State, which they're going to do. They're going to thrash them, by the way, because Oklahoma State isn't any good. And you get $150 if that bet hits, which it would. There are a lot of safe bets out there in conference championship weekend. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, kick off the NFL season, and you can get your college football gambling fix off there as well. You got everything that you need. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. That's what a lot of teams are doing as they undergo coaching searches. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. That's billion with a B, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate or multiple candidates, perhaps within 24 hours. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Let's talk about some coaching carousel stuff. By the way, I do have to shout out Damian, who we had a little in the YouTube comments friendly exchange before the season about USC. I think his specific notion was USC will have at least 3 losses or 4. Of course, they end the year with 5, the most in Lincoln Riley's career. I had USC winning more games than that. So, Damian, full props. And your reward is getting a shout out here on the show as we had previously arranged. So, congrats. That was well called on your part. What has not been well called is this Chip Kelly situation. So Chip Kelly appears to be retained as UCLA's head football coach. There were rumors, Jason Scheer down at, I think it's Wildcat Authority, a 24/7 sports site, reported that they were going to let him go. And then it shifted and they're not going to let him go. And it appears they're going to keep Chip Kelly around. Now, not every UCLA fan in the world, and certainly not every UCLA alum or booster, has been thrilled with Chip Kelly, who in his tenure at UCLA does not have a good record against winning teams in the Pac-12, does have a decent record overall. His last 3 years, 8-4, 9-4, 7-5. Now, a lot of people look at this and say UCLA fans should demand more. They shouldn't settle for mediocrity here. I get that. I get wanting to take that next step as a program. I think there are a couple reasons why UCLA is making the right call here. And to be abundantly clear, the pressure will be on Chip Kelly going into next season because even though it's a new conference and whatnot, the bottom of that conference is pretty weak in the Big Ten. Frankly, the Big Ten isn't very deep. It's Michigan and Ohio State, and then it's Penn State, and then it's 50 feet of crap. And then there's everyone else. Like the Big Ten, Iowa's in the championship game, for goodness sake. They can't score. They cannot put the ball into the end zone. Michigan is going to blank them. That game is going to be like 31-0 in the Big Ten championship game. I do not think Iowa's going to score an offensive touchdown. Absolutely not. So I think that in the Big Ten, UCLA has to win more games next year than they did this year, or else it's time to move on from Chip Kelly. And have the results been spectacular? No. Has he won a lot of big games? No. He has beaten USC, I believe, 3 times. 2021, when the Trojans were down, this year, and I think in 2018 or 19, he pulled an upset in that game as well. So that matters, I think, somewhat in helping retain your job. Now, winning against USC this year did a lot to keep Chip Kelly the head coach of UCLA football. Losing to Cal the following week, 33-7. I thought Cal would win. I didn't think they'd win the game 33-7 at the Rose Bowl. That was not good and threw questions kind of back up into the air about, hey, is Chip Kelly going to be let go? Do they want him? And all this sort of stuff. 2 reasons that I think Chip Kelly should be retained for one more season. And if that doesn't go well, then you can move on from it. Number 1, UCLA has never been a football school. They are the number 2 program in their own city. And I understand the schedule has been pretty weak, which is not Chip Kelly's fault. They did beat LSU back in 2021, and then Michigan backed out of the home and home. So when people say, well, their schedule hasn't been any good, it's inflating his win totals, that's not actually on him. He was not afforded the opportunity to play Michigan in those games. Do they win? Probably not. But will we ever know? We also will not. So that's the first thing. I think that when you're at a place that has not historically been a great brand in football, they've played in the Pac-12 championship game twice. They have won it 0 times. They're a basketball school. That is what, as a university, they care about the most. They don't get the greatest fan support, though it is certainly overblown, how few fans they have because they still have, high attendance numbers. They just don't fill up the Rose Bowl, but it's not some avid home environment. That's why I think they've struggled at home in the last several seasons because they don't have a super rabid fan base. Like, it's okay. Their stadium is not on campus. Football has not been, as someone who is an outsider for the UCLA program, has not been made a large priority down there at UCLA. So he has taken a program that was in shambles when he took it over, rough couple years. COVID year happens, whatever, throw it out. Nothing matters there. And in the last 3 seasons, he's taken them to a bowl game. So that's not nothing. Now, has he won at the level that he is being paid at? No, I don't think so. And that's why going into next year, I think he should be on the hot seat. But I think that he has turned around the culture to where Bruins fans are not satisfied with winning 7 games and getting to a bowl game. That in and of itself is a sign of progress. He has had them ranked once upon a time a year ago inside the top 10. It's not as if the flashes, the potential hasn't been there. It just hasn't been sustained over the course of the season. But to say that the results have been so bad that you've got to let him go, I don't agree with that. And here's the second thing. He demonstrated when he first got to UCLA that he can take a young, talented, but inexperienced and raw quarterback who is turnover prone and turn him into an upper tier conference quarterback. Are his offenses as good as they were at Oregon back in the day? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. By the way, he made a great hire with D'Anton Lynn. I apologize if I'm not getting that name right, but defensive coordinator, that dude looks like a stud. It's the best UCLA defense maybe in the history of the program, certainly in quite a long time. And yes, the offense let them down 100%. And that's part of the reason I think it's hot seat going into next year. But DTR in year 1 versus DTR his last year of college football, really his last couple of years, was a much improved player. So that element, which has always been essential to Chip Kelly's offense and was my big gripe with the Bruins going into this year. People, on the national level, like Josh Pate or Joel Klatt talked about him as a conference contender, and I was down on the Bruins, and I got their record exactly right, and I got it right for the right reasons. In the best quarterback conference in America with an offensive coach who needs to have great quarterback play, you can't be rolling out a revolving door of guys that are not good enough to get the job done. So I think that the security of Chip Kelly's job for next year should hinge upon Dante Moore. If Dante Moore is able to be just a middle of the pack starter and look like by year 3, he could be an upper level starting quarterback in the Big Ten, then you know that Chip Kelly has found something and is going to be able to make it work. But if next year, if you're halfway through the season and Dante Moore's the same guy and he's turning the ball over and he hasn't made any progress, then you can think about making a change. You can have that hot seat conversation. But when you have a guy as talented as Dante Moore, who is the future at the quarterback position, as long as he is retained and as long as Chip Kelly's there, I suspect that he will be. If he is retained, that's your starting quarterback next year. And if he takes a step forward, then UCLA as a team will take a step forward, because the biggest thing that held them back this year, they ran the football well. They played great defense. You know what they couldn't do? They couldn't throw the ball, even though they had great weapons. Why? Because their quarterback play just wasn't very good. Ethan Garbers is a below average starter. Dante Moore made a lot of freshman mistakes, and Colin Schlee is purely a runner. So I think you have to allow for the possibility of him unlocking Dante Moore the way he did DTR. And I got a couple more thoughts on that before we wrap up at today's show. First, let me tell you about Prize Picks. So it's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy. So your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. If you want to play alongside Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill or comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Get started at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. So finishing up my thought here on UCLA, when you are a program that does not make football a top priority at a university, you have to understand there are going to be rebuild years. And I always felt it was going to be one of those years for UCLA under Chip Kelly this year. So given that they fulfilled my expectations to the T, I do not think you should move on from Chip Kelly at this point in time. If next year you take a step back or you aren't taking a step forward, then you can make a change. But given the track record he had with DTR, given that it's a university that is semi-committed to football and being really good, I think that UCLA competing for a conference championship was mistimed by 1 year. They were off by 1 year. If last year's UCLA team had this year's defense with D'Anton Lynn as the defensive coordinator, they would have competed for, and I think played in the Pac-12 championship game. I think they would have beaten USC. I think they would have beaten Arizona, certainly. And instead of ending the regular season 9-3, I think they would have been 11-1. I think that's what that UCLA team was capable of. But when you look at Chip Kelly's track record, he's always had a great quarterback and gotten great production from that position when his teams have succeeded. UCLA, DTR 2021 and 2022. In those years, he goes 8-4 and 9-3 in the regular season. By any objective measure, those are good regular seasons for UCLA. You take away the quality quarterback play, and boom, you limit Chip Kelly's offense. Go back to his time at Oregon even. Year 1, Jeremiah Masoli. I'm an Oregon fan. Let me tell you, Masoli was really good. The next year, an even better quarterback, Darren Thomas. And he had Darren Thomas in 2011 as well. And Darren Thomas is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in Oregon history. In his 2 years as a starter, he won the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 and played a national championship game. And the next year, won the Pac-12 and won the Rose Bowl. And then the following year, he had this guy named Marcus Mariota. You might have heard of him. He was pretty good. So that component has to be there, or Chip Kelly's offense does not work. But they still know how to run the football. They've made a great hire at defensive coordinator, and you've got the young quarterback. I'm gonna put my thoughts out right there, or end my thoughts right there. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter if you feel differently. But that's why I think retaining Chip Kelly for at least another season is the right move. That is what I feel. It's a thin margin. I get it, but I think the upside is real. So Jedd Fisch, meanwhile, there were rumors about a Jedd Fisch extension reported by Jason Scheer that were going to make him the highest paid football coach in program history. Turns out that happens when you win 6 games in a row and end the regular season probably ranked in the top 15. I think it's absolutely warranted. And Jedd Fisch, I talked about how he and Jonathan Smith were going to be coaching targets. There are more jobs coming open across the country. There are a lot more jobs coming open, Power 5 jobs that are coming open. Keeping Jedd Fisch at Arizona, I think that'd be a great thing for the Wildcats, and I don't need to pretend to be some sort of big-time expert to think that. If you're thinking about giving him a contract extension, yeah, I would. He has shown a lot, whether it's quarterback development, offensive development, culture, talent acquisition, recruiting, it's all been there. I think he's got all the pieces to be a really, really good football coach. So before I get to the predictions before the season, this question came in from Tyler. He said, Spencer, what are your thoughts about making changes to the transfer portal? I always thought the transfer portal is equivalent to the NFL free agency. I hate to see players leave Oregon State in the transfer portal because of Jonathan Smith leaving. Don't forget that Oregon State has a bowl game. Yeah, I think the schedule is completely messed up. The calendar in college football, backwards. It's totally backwards. You shouldn't have a national signing day, even in, early one, quote unquote, which is now the one that everyone cares about the most. You shouldn't have that before bowl season ends. Players should not be allowed to enter the portal before the season's completely over. The calendar needs to be adapted to the season to maximize the amount of interest and reduce the stress on coaches and staffs. And I mean, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I'd fully support altering it so that the portal doesn't open until after, a team's, really everyone's season ends. I think after the national championship in early January, that's when the portal should open. You should go back to just having the one signing day in February, or have one in February and one in March. I don't know, but I think that's the way it should be. But people who run college football don't know a lot about it, which is kind of sad. So what do I know about college football? Well, I know that my preseason predictions for every team did pretty darn well. Not perfect, certainly far from it, but pretty darn well. So I'll go team by team here. The recap, just a quick spoiler here for those who want the Cliff Notes version. I was within one game of correctly predicting the record or getting the record correct of 7 of the 12 Pac-12 teams. Second year in a row that I have gotten 7 of 12 within one game or fewer. So I was 6-5 picking the over-unders. I said to stay away from Washington State. That turned out to be a good decision, but I think that's pretty solid. And I was right on the money with 3 teams' records. So Washington, their over-under win total was 9.5. I predicted them 10-2 before the season. They end at 12-0. Washington State, over-under win total is 6.5. I said stay away. I predicted 7-5, got 5-7. Not bad. I also said that was Washington State's floor if everything went wrong, and everything kind of did go wrong. So, not bad. Oregon, I predicted 10-2. They ended up 11-1. Their win total, 9.5. They go over. Oregon State, I had them as an over, but I did get within a game here. I predicted 9-3. They end up 8-4. Stanford had the lowest win total in the conference. They went over, by the way. Their total was 2.5. They won 3 games. I predicted 2-10, got 3-9. Cal, right on the money, baby. Right on the money with my Golden Bears. My beloved California ACC-bound Golden Bears. I predicted 6-6. Lo and behold, here we are, 6-6. That win total that once upon a time was 4.5, moved to 5.5. They went over both of those numbers, and they're going to a bowl game. Good for Justin Wilcox. USC, this was my biggest whiff by far, and I think that I'm not alone in this discussion. I predicted 10-2, thought their defense would be better with their personnel. Nope. They go 7-5. Didn't see that one coming. Easily my biggest miss. UCLA, I predicted 7-5. I got 7-5. I had them under their 8.5 win total. Got that one right. Utah, look, I predicted 10-2 pending Cam Rising's health. And guess what? He wasn't healthy. And I said before the year, if he doesn't play, they're not a contender. Well, He did not play. They're not a contender. They end the season 8-4. They go under 8.5. A couple of really close games in there, including most notably against Washington, that they weren't able to pull out. But Utah, I think, should be a ranked team. They're not. What a coaching job by Kyle Whittingham, though. To go 8-4 with Bryson Barnes / Nate Johnson throughout the year, and now Nate Johnson's in the portal, I like it. Just really good job by Whittingham. Colorado, remember when they were good? Yeah, me too. That didn't last very long. I predicted them 3-9 before the year. They end the season 4-8. They do go over their win total of 3.5. But I tell you what, for all the talk about Colorado and everything I heard from their fans before the season, and I was just a hater, last year they went 1-8 in Pac-12 play. And this year they went, drum roll please, 1-8. Look at that. It's almost like it takes time. So I think they can build more talent, though their recruiting efforts in 2024 don't look very good right now. Arizona before the year. Some people like this team more than others. That was me. I had them 7-5. Arizona said, you're underestimating us, which apparently I was. They end up 9-3. Jed Fish should be Pac-12 Coach of the Year. Full stop. I would vote him first. I'd vote Kalen DeBoer second. You want to make him co-coaches of the year? Fine. Arizona's win total was 4.5. Did you know that Arizona and Arizona State had the same preseason win total? 4.5. I got both of those over-unders right. And I got both their records pretty darn well. I had Arizona 7-5. They ended 9-3. And Arizona State was the third team, along with Cal and UCLA, that I got right on the money. I didn't pick every game correctly, but got the record right. 3-9 is where I had the Sun Devils before the year. They end the season 3-9. But crazy that Arizona, that's going to be in the top 15, I think, in the college football playoff rankings, at least in the top 20, had the same preseason win total as Arizona State. That's 3-9 and in a complete and total rebuild. So I feel pretty good about those predictions. Within one game or right on the money with 7 of 12 teams. And the only major whiff on there is USC, which I don't think anybody had 7-5 coming. Well, Damian came pretty close. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.